Hey guys, what's going on? Cookies here with a quick start Resto Druid guide for Mythic Plus content. So just like the Mistweaver Monk guide and all the other ones I'm going to be doing, we're going to go over talents, Azerite, essences, stat priority really quick, and then just a tiny little clip into kind of gameplay and talking about cat weaving, since I know a lot of people are kind of unfamiliar or uncomfortable with playing it even. So going first off into our talents. We're going to talk about the different talents here. So the first one is going to be, I'm just going to activate its home here so I can switch talents around and stuff. Your go-to choice is typically going to be Cenarian Ward. This will just be like an extra boost to tank healing / kind of single target healing, depending on who's taking it. So this is kind of the go-to choice, but if you're going to run multiple Grove tending traits, then Prosperity is usually going to be your go-to just for the extra healing, and depending on the week and whatnot. And then Abundance can be viable on like tyrannical weeks where the bosses are going to be really drawn out and you really need to be careful with your mana. Next here, Wild Charge has the most versatility. Tiger's Dash is fine. This is kind of just personal preference, so you won't get too much usage out of Renewal. But it can be useful as well if you're finding a hard time surviving or on things like Grievous and stuff. And then the next row, Feral Affinity is pretty much the go-to in 99% of cases, unless you're not wanting to do the cat weaving style of play. And then in that case, you can take Guardian Affinity just for the extra like damage reduction and stuff like that for certain bosses. Next up, Typhoon, in most cases, is going to provide you with the most benefit. It's just the most versatile out of the three choices, but Mighty Bash can have its own uses, so find the dungeons where stuns are especially needed, like Tol de Gore is the one that stands out the most to me off the top of my head. And then Mass Entanglement, it was good for things like Infested in Season 1 of Mythic Plus, so if you can find uses for it, I'm sure it can be useful, but Typhoon is going to be used most of the time. Next row, Cultivation is kind of the go-to talent. Again, if you're going to be cat weaving, there's basically two main builds. For these last three talents, it's essentially cat weaving or just flat-out healing output. So for cat weaving, you're going to go with Cultivation. And for the more healing-focused builds, you're going to be going Incarnation Tree of Life just to give yourself an extra cooldown and a lot of healing output for 30 seconds, which can really help in, boss fights or big pulls and stuff like that. Soul of the Forest can be viable only if you're playing Prosperity, but it just doesn't give enough benefits for me to make it worth taking over Cultivation or Tree of Life. But if you like Soul of the Forest, you can play around with it and see if it works well for you. Next up for cat weaving, we have Spring Blossoms. This is going to be your go-to talent because all you do is have to use one global for Efflorescence, and then for the next 30 seconds, you just keep applying Hoths to everybody inside this circle. So it's one global for a lot of healing. Which, the less globals you have to use, the better in the cat weaving build. And then for the more healing-focused build, Inner Peace is going to be a go-to. Spring Blossoms is still good if the group can be stacked up a lot of the time and whatnot, which in dungeons, that's usually the case. And then Stonebark can be useful if like your tank needs Ironbark that much faster, even though Ironbark's already on like a 1 minute cooldown. But if you need that much more, you need it to be more powerful, then there you go. But yeah, Inner Peace is good if you need that cooldown, So this is kind of just a choose depending on the dungeon and your playstyle. And then for our last talents, Photosynthesis is the go-to for cat weaving, and this is because when you put Life Bloom on the tank, they will almost be left alone just with a Life Bloom on them and can be totally fine while you go and cat weave, so it just helps with the single target healing. And then it's also versatile because you can put it on yourself to help with the AoE healing. And then for the more healing-oriented build, if you're not going to be cat weaving, Germination's really good, and Flourish can be useful too if you need the extra cooldown. Germination just isn't viable if you're going to be cat weaving because you're using 2 globals per player to apply rejuvenations, and that's just, you're never going to be able to do that if you want to actually cat weave. So yeah, that covers talents really quickly, and then we're going to go over our Azerite. So here you can see I have like a raid setup of Azerite. This is not ideal for Mythic Plus, so we're going to switch these over to what I use for Mythic Plus, which is going to be those. So We'll talk about these traits. So the first one is Grove Tending. Typically you just run one of these, but I have been kind of playing around with running multiple and running like Prosperity and stuff like that, so you can try that out. There's some druids that stack like 2, 3 Grove Tending traits, and then a lot of others who just use one. So for the typical like default build, you're gonna just get 1 Grove Tending, but since I have 3 on my gear, I decided why not. And then the next most valuable trait that you're going to want to make sure you have is High Noon. This you pretty much want to stack as many as you can. 2 or 3 is ideal. But again, 1 is totally fine, but as long as you have, you know, 1 at least, that helps a lot, because this is basically just you spend 1 global and you're going to do a whole bunch of damage to mobs in the instance, especially when you're doing bigger pulls and stuff like that. So High Noon's a really valuable trait. And then you have... like this other piece of gear I have has Lively Spirit. Lively Spirit's really good, but it's more valuable in like very coordinated play or higher end play with an actual like group of players that you're talking to in Discord and whatnot, so that you can actually utilize Lively Spirit to its fullest for like bigger pulls and stuff like that. Because in Pugs you're not going to really need Lively Spirit to out heal a lot of the stuff that people will pull, because they'll be really safe about it. So the other good traits are going to be Rampant Growth is fine, but just only have 1. You don't want to run multiples of that. It's not good as multiples. Power of the Moon is a good trait in like either with High Noon or just like as kind of a filler trait. Power Moon's good if you want to do more damage. It's just that you have to use Moonfire, which isn't as valuable as Sunfire. And then the other most valuable traits are the generic traits. So here you can see Malicious Scheming, that gives like a haste proc. You got like Trade Winds here is really good. So like the generic like Mastery / haste / crit stat gains are really good on your gear as well. And Loyal to the End is super, super, super good only if every single person in your group is going to be running it. So again, if you have a really coordinated group and you all want to run Loyal to the End is pretty much a must-have. Okay, so that's Azerite. Then we're going to go over our essences. So let's see here. The go-to major that you're going to be using is Ever-Rising Tide for healing, and then for more damage-focused content, if you want to like be focusing more on your damage and you don't need to focus as much on healing, Crucible of Flame is going to be the go-to just to help you do extra DPS. And then we have like Memory of Lucid Dreams can be viable for long drawn-out tyrannical bosses and whatnot where you need extra mana. Lifebinder's Invocation can be good if you want like a big healing CD for certain bosses that do a lot of AoE damage, like Galv in Temple Sethralus, or Coven in Waycrest Manor. Lifebinder is pretty good for that kind of stuff. But so is Ever-Rising Tide, so that's why they kind of compete with each other. Ever-Rising Tide is usually the most picked one for a major. And then other than that, Well of Existence is really good because you, as a druid, you lack single target healing. So Well of Existence major can actually be pretty valuable to give you like an extra single target spot heal. So those are for majors, and then for minors, you're pretty much going to always run Ever-Rising Tide if it's not your major. Run it as a minor for the intellect bonus. Memory of Lucid Dreams is good if you want more mana, again, and it gives you a nice little versatility buff. Crucible of Flame's a good minor if you want to do a little extra damage, but the healing effect is really poor, so don't worry about that. Vision of Perfection could even be viable if you want Trank more often, or you're doing pulls in a certain way that allows for Vision to basically put your Trank on a perfect cooldown where you want it. Vitality Conduit, that's kind of being messed around with, so I'm not 100% sure on this one, but it is viable to use at least. And again, Lifebinders, if you want a nice little passive heal and you don't need like the mana from Memory of Lucid Dreams. And I guess the only other one that is worth mentioning is Artifice of Time. Yeah, you run this as a major if you have a tank who needs like extra externals, or you're on a boss fight where the tank is in danger of getting one shot essentially by something. Artifice of Time can be like an extra Iron Bark or essentially like a big healing cooldown for them. So that covers essences, and we're going to go over stat priority now. So typically you're going to run Haste Mastery as your stat priority if you're just focusing on Mythic Plus content. But if you're not too worried, or you kind of like are a general healer and you just do Mythic Plus as kind of a piece of content of the game on top of raiding or whatever else you may do, just equip item level and really value leech items if you get leech or avoidance as well. But other than that, just equip item level and don't worry too much about your stats. And then for like sockets and enchants, just socket and enchant whatever your lowest stat is. So for instance, like right now, my lowest stat is Mastery by quite a long shot, so I should be socketing and enchanting for Mastery, but I play Boomkin, so I can't do that. But yeah, and then the only other thing is for gear. You're typically not going to use healer trinkets, actually, if you're running like the cat weaving focus build. So Leviathan's Lure, Shiver Venom Relic, stuff like that is really, really strong to use. What I usually run is my Leviathan's Lure and a Jellyweed, since I have those two at really high eye level. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So that covers all of our like gearing and whatnot and our talents and all that stuff. And then I just have a little clip to pull up right here of just a low key I was running. It's just like a 13 siege. It's Sanguine Grievous week. This happened a couple days ago. So we'll just kind of run through and I'll kind of show you guys. The main focus of this is to show you how to cat weave, because I know a lot of people are unfamiliar with how that works or how to do it effectively. So I figured like showing it on a Grievous week is probably a good idea, because that's when it's the hardest to do cat weaving, because you have to focus a lot more on healing with Grievous going on. So you can see here, I start in cat form, always start in stealth because it makes your rake do extra damage. And all it really is just rake and then shred spam on single target or swipe spam on AoE. And then just spend your combo points when they get to, 4 or 5. And you can see here I'm still DPSing the boss. We take damage, I swap out, I wild growth really quick. I put a couple hots on people, and then I'm right back into cat form after I refresh my dots on the boss. Oh, actually we do run over here. So I'm like refreshing dots, I use my Crucible of Flame, I'm topping everybody off really quick, and then I think here is where I switch back to cat form, and I jump across this gap with Wild Charge, and I'm right back to DPSing. Sorry. And you can see here, just every time the group is taking that burst of AoE damage from that Tidal Surge, I am just jumping out of cat form really quick, wild growthing, maybe throwing a hot or two out, and then just going right back to being in cat. You can see here people have like 3 stacks, 4 stacks of Grievous, and I'm not concerned about it at all. I'm still just DPSing the boss. I'm literally sitting in cat form, refreshing my dots, and here I jump out. I focus heal the people that are a little low. Obviously, I let them get a little too low, but the idea is the same. You don't have to... You're not trying to keep the group at full health as a healer in Mythic Plus, I guess is a good way to put it. You're just trying to make sure that people aren't going to die to unavoidable damage. That's your only job, is to make sure that people aren't just going to die to unavoidable damage. And you can see I do significant damage. Like, I mean, I'm almost keeping up with the Balanced Druid. I mean, he is doing low DPS, but I'm ahead of the tank. So when you combine like mine and the tank's damage output, we're doing as much as a DPS or more. So if you can cat weave, it is certainly worth learning and certainly worth doing for higher keys, because it will help you time them so efficiently, especially in pugs where people tend to do a little bit lower output than they need to be doing for the keys that they're running. So yeah, that covers really everything. So if you like this video, let me know. If you want to have, a discussion about it, you can come by my stream. I stream Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, guaranteed, at about 8 p.m. Pacific. And then I try to stream outside that window on the weekends or during the day and stuff like that to do Mythic Plus and whatnot. So let me know in the comments what I can do to improve these videos. I'm going to jump out and finish the other videos as well. I'm going to get like Shaman done, Priest done, and I might get around to Paladin, but my Paladin's like super undergeared right now and I'm not having fun on it. But anyways, yeah, have a good one. Hopefully this helped, and see you guys in the next video.